nice about moving closer. That was. I wasn't even gonna suggest it, and then, yeah, you did it anyway, so. I'm just gonna kind of take notes and have this. I'm gonna do less leading and just kind of be note taking. So does anyone want to start with what they? Any ideas? I mean, maybe we want to start with what we think has been a strength so far, or what seems to be working. And maybe we'll start with that when we report out. What do you guys think has been working so far with what John and the AppCog group? Yeah, you don't have to raise your hand, you can start blurting stuff out.
One of the things that I think about the AppCog group is that just getting the word out and raising people's understanding of the cultural importance of brown ash has been very, very sort of significant for me personally to understand that, and also I think for the broader community of forest caretakers. But I'm going to pivot and not talk about that anymore, because that one of the things that I heard is that we need to give examples of how different strategies are working. And so I'm sitting at a table with Eric from Maine Audubon, and both of us have properties that have now participated in the Maine Forest Service program for ash treatment that Dave talked about yesterday. And so something that might be helpful is like trying to get some kind of testimonial from us about why we decided to participate and what the benefits are and why we think the risk is low. And to share that with other kinds of
pesticides.
that we use
Yes,
pesticides,
yeah.
right? So that's an idea that I think we can action. And Casey Willis is here from Maine Tree Foundation and was also really excited about that because they work with family forest owners.
Tree farmers.
Tree farmers, thank you. And that's an audience that would love to hear that message. So that's one thing that I thought we could like maybe action right away.
And I'm gonna jump onto that as someone who works with Nancy at the Nature Conservancy where this was, where this happened. Putting together some sort of sign on the trail saying, this is what we've done here. For more of like a public outreach, a public education of what we're doing to help prevent the spread.
I can say from the Scarborough Land Trust perspective, we have a lot of board members who are really anxious about chemical use, but they also come to me and say, hey, stewardship director, where is this problem going? Well, so what we've done is try to partner with other local conservancy groups. There's another group in Scarborough on Proud's Neck, and they've used various herbicides to control invasive species there. And they've done these like tours, they've done walks where they've had that practice. And I think that giving those sort of focused tours describing the problem and then saying, but here's the solution. And now we're planting native species because we've suppressed the invasive species pressure so much. I think that that has really helped at least our board members feel a little more comfortable with the idea of using, using this tool on our properties.
I was going to speak about your first prompt, Nate, and one of the things that I've been really excited about with the AppCog group is reinvigorating the conversation about seed collection and making it happen on the ground as well. So not only the conversation, but the action has been a really great benefit of this group coming together. Reinvigorating seed collection.
One of the things I've heard from this the last 2 days is that there isn't a solution. There's the multiple solutions, and I think that we're an instant gratification society, so we want that one thing that works, and then that's it. We're done. And I think that message that that we need to approach it in several different ways, all at the same time, is a really valuable message and might also help with board members who are concerned about one particular aspect. That's just part of the whole.
I think the other thing that's working is the the work on all three species and connecting that, I think there's a lot of, there's gaps, right, in the concern, right? It's like, oh, the ash trees in Portland are dying. Well, don't worry, those aren't brown ash. Those aren't the culturally significant ash. Oh, good, I was worried. Well, you should be worried. You should be, it should be a different kind of, you know, and so like that idea of using the strategies on all three species, connecting that communication and that messaging. But then also making sure that we absolutely hold up the importance of brown ash for the unique, like cultural importance.
Great.
One of the things that I have noticed in the recent couple of years with APCA is that they're reinvigorating the conversations between and bringing in multiple groups to talk to each other and talk with each other. And that's something I think is a real strength of what they're doing.
I'll say, I work for MAFCA and run the forestry programming there, and, although I'm new in the position, the relationship with Africa Lab has gone on for a while, and just the way that they, as like an entity, make themselves so available to do outreach work and talks. You know, they come and do a presentation at the Common Ground Country Fair, and, you know, that's, you know, just kind of that accessibility is so amazing. And having, you know, free events for people, that's really, been just so amazing. Yeah, I don't know, just shout out for that.
So I'm certainly not volunteering myself to do this. I suggested somebody
Sold.
smarter than myself. Thank you very much. I actually came into this effort through Tyler's observation of my work with the American chestnut. And we all know the history of the chestnut. Over 100 years ago, the blight started. Going front progressed over a series of years and decades. And just now we might have a restoration chestnut in maybe a decade or more. That the time scale involved is multiple careers, multiple lifetimes. That's a depressing thought for a lot of people. I think we need to figure out how to balance that message where there are things that we need to do right now, but we also understand that the payoff is going to be beyond us. And how do we balance that? It's the daily work on the one hand. On the other hand, for people who don't work in our field, that's a little different. So I think we do need to focus on that messaging of we have immediate needs, but success is not going to be determined, or might be determined in the coming years, but it's not going to be felt in the coming years.
If I could expand on that, since I'm a tree breeder, the American Chestnut Foundation sort of created a big hurdle for the tree breeding whole idea, because everyone would always point to it and say, you know, look at how long, look at how much money, and I just want to point out there's differences between the approach that we're taking and the approach they took, even from the beginning. They were doing hybrid breeding, which is a more difficult thing to do. They were doing it based on a hypothesis of 3 genes, which was incorrect. And then they switched to doing transgenics. And then there was some quality control issues there. We're not doing any of that. We're doing quantitative forest genetics, where we're talking about improving populations, not just getting single trees that have resistance. And that the whole thing is improving populations to the point that when you put them back, that they are able to reach maturity and become a self-sustaining population and can continue to co-evolve under the pressure of EV. And so in my experience, especially with the green ash, like we started that work in 12 years ago, and we already have highly resistant second generation. We definitely are going to make the same sort of setbacks. Like the first breeding program I Foundation after how many years is now saying. Yeah, but I mean, the pathogens are complicated too, so. Anyway, I just wanted that differentiation.
Thanks for the clarification, Jennifer, but it's a valid point that we've got a range of like.
Immediate short-term issues and concerns and stuff. And even whatever we're considering long-term, whether it's a resistant tree or reforestation or whatever, that's way, some of those are gonna be way down the line, right? But we have things that are gonna be, shorter, long-term issues that aren't the immediate needs. So it's a good point that balancing what we can do right away, like this next year versus what's gonna happen in the next 3-4 years, what's gonna happen in 7 to 10 years, I think it's an important point. Yeah.
The comparison between American chestnut and brown ash, it's a little bit apples and oranges in that chestnut blight started in 1900 and most of those trees are dead by 1930 or so. And it took that many years to try to start a program. Syracuse University, I think 32 years just started by Dr. Darling, I believe. And so now one of the transgenic plants is Darling 58. And now they've got another one maybe that's a little bit better. So they're similar but different. That's what you say. Whereas we're all of a sudden noticing you got a critter versus a fungus. And our needs are a little more, we can see what's happening. They're being killed, so.
Right,
We're
but
right
the
on it.
advantage is that we're starting breeding now.
Yes. So.
Or we
in
we should be starting breeding now. We don't have a massive breeding program, but that's one of the things that I'm here for, is hoping that I can get more people interested in helping us expand the capacity and do that kind of work. Rather than waiting 32 years and that's also a different scale for all the trees to be dead.
Yeah, there's another problem too, in that practically everyone was familiar with American chestnut from Georgia to Maine. In fact, there was some comment like a squirrel could start in Georgia and not have to touch the ground before getting to Maine. That's how 6 billion trees, and I don't know how many brown ash are, but one thing I think we can draw attention to, if somebody has a dooryard tree, their favorite white ash is an ash, it's gonna die. So trying to put that together with, hey, the brown ash are significant also. So you don't leave that one out. So if you can get more attention to just ash in general, that perhaps would help to get research funding, et cetera.
Just something that I've noticed as a bottleneck, both in this and just like all my seed stuff, that I think is important to think about is, Ella showed it a bit in her presentation. It's just, there's this really, really big interest from people and excitement about the ash. They've learned all this stuff now, they want to help, but then it doesn't actually lead to action. And what I get is I had a lot of property owners reaching out saying, I have these plants, why don't you come collect the seed? And I'm one person and I can't go all over the state and monitor for flowering, monitor for ripening times and get the seed all over the state. So I think the next thing is really training or getting staff or training volunteers that are willing to do that work and stay consistent with it, especially with brown ash, not seeding every year. Just like keeping that going to that next step of actually collecting that seed and actually sending that seed to the researchers that are gonna try to find this resistance from these lingering trees.
We actually need more researchers.
And more,
That are gonna be
Right.
located in
Right, it comes down to there's just not,
range.
how do we get enough people doing the work?
Yeah, that side of the room, Logan, go.
Yeah, I want to touch back on something Nancy said at the onset about engaging private family forest owners, tree farmers now. It's something I've been thinking about for a while, but maybe not just identifying brown ash on the property, but identifying what habitats brown ash will thrive in, and then that will help them find brown ash if it is there. And then developing pathways for them to get it, kind of what get it to harvesters, kind of what John, Ella, and Tyler were talking about earlier. What's the most equitable pathway to make that happen? And is it offering honorariums to harvesters to come out and check to see if it's quality enough to do that sort of stuff? But really, when it comes down to it and you look at the map of basal area of brown ash in the state, it's really concentrated where the landscape is fragmented among a bunch of landowners between 10 and 1,000 acres, and coordinating that effort is extremely difficult.
Was there another?
Go ahead.
Just following up on, you know, the ways of getting various community groups and community members involved in thinking about ash and finding ash. So my land trust often ends up getting, you know, the wet areas that developers can't do anything with, right? Ash is gonna grow there. One of the community groups that uses our properties a lot are hunters. Hunters are going off trail. They're walking through these wet areas, they're looking for deer. So one thing that we ended up doing was making these little signs that we could pop, you know, along deer trails and stuff off the main beat path that say, hey, hunters, if you see an ash tree, and many of them know their trees, can you drop a pin with your GPS? Many of them have GPS tools on them, and send it my way. And I've actually gotten data that way from this group of, you know, property users. So thinking a little bit outside the box of landowners in terms of engagement has been really beneficial for us.
I can add on to that. Yeah, Ella and Tyler have both been really helpful to our work with students in classrooms. And so we've been targeting classrooms outreach towards teachers in areas where we know that there is a lot of brown ash, and engaging students as part of the curriculum of learning how to do ash inventory and contributing data in the hopes that then they're recognizing, and actually we're hearing back from teachers all the time that kids are then like looking for ash everywhere they go in their areas. So just thinking about, you know, continuing that work with kids in schools and then after schools, places where educators are really looking for meaningful things that their students can contribute to, something that is hopeful, something that does make a difference. And then the other thing I was going to add too is that they've also been helping develop a really easy, streamlined platform where youth or anybody interested can contribute data on where they're finding ash, and then measurement data, identifying female trees for potential seed trees, and data that would then be private, you know, and owned only by APCA, so that data is protected. So things that maybe we can continue building on together.
Having just spoken with Megan, right, I got here over lunch, I think there's a vast network of people that we can plug into. I know, you know, our main focus is looking for the lingering ash for resistance breeding. And it's obviously something that cannot rely on just a few people to do. And what we do through the MAMA project is we get a lot of landowners and NGOs and community scientists involved. And we've been really energized by all the connections we've made here today. This network of people who could become involved in really doing meaningful science that will translate into long-term conservation. And I do want to make the point that I think the distinction has to be made, well, like when you're talking about resistance breeding, other approaches, and saying that, well, there's long-term stuff, right, and there's short-term stuff. And those are long-term, I guess, deliverables in terms of arriving at, you know, resistant trees for replanting. But but it has short-term needs. And if we had the same filter and we applied it to seed collection, we could say, well, seed collection, when is that going to translate into either resistant trees or using all this all this genetic diversity that the seed collection has captured? That's not something that's going to translate into something within a year or 2 years or 5 years, or, you know, maybe even 10 years, but it's something that has to be done now while those seed can be collected. And the same is true for looking for the lingering trees, in that, you know, as Jennifer mentioned in her presentation, there's basically a limited time window, right? Because these trees are not completely resistant. They won't be there forever. So you have to look for them when that certain mortality threshold has been reached, timely place, and not wait too long where they're mixed up with ingrowth or where those trees have died. And again, so we're energized here because I think all these folks here can do address those immediate needs in terms of finding those trees on the ground. And, just as is the case also for seed collection, it's not going to translate into instant results, but needs to be done in a timely manner.
Another thing
There's
to
a
add
chat
on to
note.
that.
Oh, sorry, I was just gonna say there's a chat note online.
Yeah, you have.
So Jessica Colby mentioned, she said, definitely want to reiterate that scouting throughout the year for female trees and getting folks out collecting, it's a lot of time and effort. Thank you.
I was just gonna add on that by saying another immediate breeding need, like the faster you get your breeding program started, you start working on it now, the faster you're gonna get that longer term product. And what our data was showing that starting with screening seedlings, we talked about this for anyone in here who came to the session this morning, that people could actually start growing black ash seedlings and then planting them out and just monitoring them as EAB comes through. And at a certain point, getting rid of ones that are doing really badly and maybe preserving or propagating the ones that are doing better for further testing. So that's one way we could get at it. The benefit of the mature lingering ash trees is that if you find the scion, if you collect a mature tree that is a flowering tree, and you collect scion from that tree and we get it grafted, it'll continue to flower. So we can start doing breeding to get that next generation, which is going to be the new generation, much quicker.
I'm just moderating the comments. You can also view them off the side of the screen a little bit, but Jacob the scanner asked, going off of asking hunters to submit points, would it make sense to have an app similar to IMAP invasives, along with a public outreach program to inform the public of the reason and importance for knowing where these ash trees and stands are? That way, in areas of concern, the public, be it hunters, landowners, etc., could provide points of where the ash are, along with pictures and or descriptions of the trees, stands if they desired, and it could all be stored on in one consistent location.
I mean, people are already using iNaturalist to just report species. So, if there is no concern, like if it's a general public just reporting and they are not concerned about giving that knowledge out, that's one platform that it's widely used and people are using it. That's how we are sometimes looking like, where are the black ash in our resource.
That I think APCA has done really well is sort of helping move along this like non-Indigenous individual concern about protecting ash and really transforming that into collective action items that we can all do. And something that I heard Tyler say and John, is that landowners and land managers are interested in doing something, but they're sort of on the fence, right? Like they weren't giving definitive answers as to what they might do. And like noticing who's in the room for organizations here, I think conservation has showed up in a pretty big way, but some of the people that Tyler is working with, specifically foresters and loggers, what I heard him say is we need their buy-in and we need to understand their interests more. And I think back to like the power of communications, especially from reputable organizations like TNC and the Maine Forest Service and Audubon, putting out these statements of support and success could really help influence other people who are, on the fence or don't know how they want to, spend their money, and just using that influence to our benefit.
You're talking about needing an army of people, and one of the things you might want to consider that APCOT that University of Massachusetts has done is they have a program called Keystone, which is run by, now it's run by Paul Catanzaro, which I believe a lot of folks in this room know. He's a great guy. It was originally started, I believe, by Dave Kittredge, whose email passed away. And it takes people that from all kinds of different communities, brings them together for some training. These are people who are not necessarily foresters. They generally have some influence over some land requirement. And they go back to their community and then use that knowledge and not necessarily train other people, but start getting a network going. They know how to talk to landowners and so on. That, I can tell you, I didn't know how to spell EAB before I went to Keystone. I hadn't really heard of this whole issue of invasive species, and I was there in 2014. And for me, who's not a forester, I'm an electrical engineer, so this was a big eye opener to me. But I've gotten more involved in these kind of things, so perhaps APCOT can replicate some of that success that UMass Keystone program has had.
Yeah, and they already work closely with Paul, so it'd be a.
Yeah, right.
Actual, you've been very patient way in the back.
Thank you. So I'll second that because I'm another one of those Keystone cooperators and it's one of the reasons I'm here. And in part, what I think they do in some respects is celebrate citizen science. So they take all of us who are interested in the natural world and interested in making other connections with other communities and see how we can have the discussion like we're having here and bring people together. So, you know, like the latest project I'm working on in our town, version 3 of trying to get a tree bylaw passed of all things, because trees are expensive. So God forbid that a developer might want to save trees, right? And I mean, we're all here to save trees. So I just look at it as like, that's an excellent idea. And that program is fabulous for like cheap money. And if you don't have any money, I'm sure they have scholarship programs, but they get, I don't know, 50 or 60 of us all together, and there's dorms. So you're just together for 2.5, 3 days, talking, going on field trips. It's a great experience. Yeah.
Gary, you got something good?
Another large group that's already out there are master gardeners. And they're interested in this kind of stuff, you know. So one of the big holes that we have here in Maine is we don't have a forestry cooperative extension person. So it would be nice to have that position back. You know, I don't see it happening, but again, that's another reason why we need to engage our legislators and get them on board in terms of how to help us manage invasive species in general, but this one as well, because you know, budgets are tight and they're getting tighter, and who knows what will happen with the latest, you know, situation, but it's a big hole. I mean, there hasn't been a cooperative extension forestry position for, I don't know how long, quite a long time, and
He just started a year ago.
oh, really?
We have half of a cooperative.
We have half of a cooperative.
Earlier after the panel, talking about the mobile, the ash pounder, that cooperative extension, because there's hubs in every county, could be a good partner to host mobile sort of ash pounding, you know, whether it's the tool itself, or workshops on it. So extension has been raised in other parts of this.
I think there's a lot of excitement and energy around community seed collecting, but once that seed's collected, it sounds like there's different places that seed can go for different to different ends, like whether it be to the genetics program or to one of the you know, Fort Knox or something for more research. If there was like a database or someplace collected where you've collected your seed, now it can go here for this reason or here for this means, or if it makes more sense if we're just looking to, if your goal is to preserve ash and plant out, maybe thinking of having a community nursery, like it sounds like just cold stratifying and planting out seedlings doesn't seem too hard for the home gardener or like even a local land trust to have a little plot. So having some more information on.
I do think that's the big next step. So Emily's manual has like the where to send seeds.
Awesome.
There's like a little flow chart and it explains like the different types of cleaning that you need to do for each facility. And then really the next step we've talked about is how to teach people how to grow those plants. And there's a few of us in the state like currently growing them in different types. And it's really like getting together and giving people the options of the like really, really low key growing seeds in a pot versus the cold stratification.
Yeah, that's been on John's radar for a while, so I know, yeah, you mentioned it was part of Emily's manual that we put together. And I think they actually want to have something more local at UMaine here. Yeah, so they're working on it, and I know that's strongly connected to the tribes, but I think there's so much interest from like the land trust and other folks that there's probably opportunities there as they build capacity and start to pull it together.
This lady mentioned planting. I called the Saratoga Tree Nursery a couple of weeks ago to find out what kind, I collect walnuts, butternuts, acorns, and I wanted to find out what their needs were. And I mentioned ash, and they said, well, we're not planting any ash because it dies or whatever it was. And I'm thinking, well, that's not very forward thinking. It seems like you should at least express some kind of interest about storing seeds or something. So I report back to DEC and forestry, lands and forests about what's going on here. I will make sure that I mention that, hey, what's going on with your Saratoga Tree Nursery? I don't see anything happening here. We all know that the beginning of the key to the solution, almost every problem starts with education. And that's what a lot of you have just been, that's sort of the obvious, but it doesn't hurt to remind us either about that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there's certainly education that's going on. Jennifer may know more about this than I do, but I know at the federal level, like the geneticists are working a lot with individual state nurseries to try to both build capacity and to encourage them to start doing plantings. And for instance, just recently, this, state of New Hampshire, their nursery has a bunch of plantings from ash that was collected, in that bumper crop we had a couple of years ago. So, and I know they're talking with the state nursery in New York as well. So those conversations are happening. I think it's a lot of times it's money and personnel and getting people on board. So it's continued awareness.
Could be,
Yeah, it's a good point.
I was just gonna say, one of the things that I think APCA's done such a beautiful job with is really fostering those very authentic and deeply rooted relationships with the Wabanaki people and coming at it from this place of listening. So that they can then build a bridge to the wider community. And I'm also gonna say it, the whiter community. Because I feel like there's this knowledge gap. If you don't have connections to Wabanaki people in your day-to-day life, there can be this huge lacuna in terms of like how to approach in a way that's not harmful. And I think Richard Sillyboy's, his example of the woman calling him at 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday and then demanding 2 baskets even while she's offering, these ash trees that are on her property. I think there's just like this knowledge gap of like what she's actually saying to him in the way that she's saying it. And, I had a conversation last night to someone that I helped get here because they have, some 200 acres that they're working with and their eyes were like wide open. They're like, how do we foster better relationships? And I think like APCA can keep working in that direction to help people start to bridge and build those relationships more. Especially when you were saying that the primary places where there still is these black ash stands are in these properties that are like, super ranging in size, and a lot of it's privately held.
I add, so I think what everyone said, particularly you, Regina, one thing like we've said, APCA has really proven itself to be really efficient and proficient in engaging and informing as well as bridging. But I think the next step, a great next step, would be to engage the large commercial landowners. And I work for public lands, as does Nick and Jacob, who chirped in there. So that's 630,000 acres of public land. And if you look at the map of the outbreaks, you look at it's sort of like a sandwich. the majority of that land in between those two outbreaks is large industrial commercial forest. So I think there's an opportunity, it's gonna be, might be difficult, but to reach out to that demographic. Be a great next step.
Great.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, that's one of the things that FSM is doing in working with with large landowners that have easements is just those landowners are bombarded with opportunities for outreach and whatever. And I think they've been getting the APCA newsletters and information, but not many people have been showing up. There've been scattered few. But I think having somebody that can say, hey, you know, this is important, and here, point them, you know, in that personal connection to those, and they've been open. I've been surprised at, yes, how many people I've talked to at those organizations that haven't realized the cultural significance of these sites, and that just, as somebody mentioned, the possibility of just dropping a pin on some of these as they go through the woods would be helpful. And so, yes, it's slow making those connections, but I think there's a willingness is there. They just don't know where to start or.
Yeah, I'll just tag on to that. It's daunting too.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with such a large scale. But just the last 2 days, I mean, I have a list of things that probably make Nick do some of this stuff too. Go back to the GIS and like, okay, well now, you know, and even hearing Richard talk about the bend in the river, and it's like in the center of the bend, it's like, so all this is stuff that it's like, okay, this is attainable, so. Yeah.
And I plan on sending a bunch of the brochures to, you know, personal contacts at places, because it's a good, handy starting place, easy to digest, to get people to think of, just to start thinking about it, so that they can those next steps, when they get excited about, oh, we found a whole bunch, then you bring somebody out there, or you look for the female trees into the seed collection. Just having more of those points, as opposed to somebody with their 5 acres and not have, super excited, but don't have any of the resource there, whereas these large landowners definitely have the resource out there somewhere. So.
Make the point that with some of those large landowners, having had some of those conversations, the problem is not getting information to access. It's just, as you say, where in these hundreds of thousands of acres is it? And it's way out in the boonies somewhere, and if they were asked, they would say yes. But we don't have one central resource that would say, look here, 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 and here, or a place to dump information. Oh, just contact so-and-so. That, oh, we saw this here, this here, this here, because there's layers between people who make baskets, collect the wood, who know the people, who know the landowners, who know this, that there's more of an information gap in some cases than an actual access gap, that if we just knew, then that would be pretty straightforward.
For sure.
I'm gonna put Maggie on the spot. Is that the gap that the platform is hoping to fill?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a tool for collecting that information. And one of the things that's really important about that tool that makes it different, I love IMAP invasives, and I know that came up already. But it gives specific coordinate data, and a lot of people, for various reasons, do not want to reveal the exact location of brown ash stands, or, you know, something that's on private property. So we have a tool that anybody can use to contribute data for where ash is located, and another, you know, variety of information that's useful for seed collection, that's useful also for assessing whether it's a quality basket tree. And that information is stored under agreement with Tyler and Ella, and then hopefully we'll be adding a few people from the tribal departments of natural resources staff to that database. So the tool exists for collecting it. It went live maybe a couple of weeks ago, so maybe that's why we haven't been talking about it more broadly, but we'd be really excited to share it. There are anonymous data entry options, and then there's also ways that you can just sign up for an account and enter anywhere you are at any point. So I'm very happy to share the tool. It's on a poster next door. Go ahead.
It is on the poster, and I think it would be great to have a webinar with APCA to demonstrate the tool for this kind of audience, and so that, you know, we can learn it and share it with those we, you know.
Let's just also remember, it's not just an information gap and filling in those pieces of information. It's a cultural gap too, right? White people mapping natural resources has never ended well for indigenous communities. And so like this idea, well, we'll just map everything, we'll keep track of, like, that's not a, we're not offering that from a position of trust. And so like, it's not just fueling the information, it's building those, I mean, like what Maggie's describing is a lot more intentional than just putting it up on a map and saying, here it is, here's my brown ash, anybody can take it, right? That's not a, that's like, and I think more time with Suzanne and others that really understand data sovereignty and things like that is really useful information as well.
Yeah, you also wanna know, like, if somebody goes and gets it, you don't wanna have 250 other people going to the same spot and just finding the stone. But you guys have been like great, we're already like almost 50 minutes in, so. You know, one of the things I thought we should definitely start off with when it's our turn to kind of bring this all together to the whole group is, I think we should use it as an opportunity to thank John for bringing us all together. I mean, do we wanna elaborate more than that?
It's been effective, I guess.
I feel like he has a really inclusive and welcoming air. And I think that like carries over to everybody. And it makes people that might be coming in unsure of how much knowledge they hold or what values they might contribute to the conversation, like give them a chance to settle in to a hard topic.
I would say he's been doing this for what, the past 16 years or so, since the rejuvenation of the Brown Ash Task Force, bringing diverse groups together that don't always necessarily talk easily and well together, and the changes that have happened over those past years is huge.
I would add to that too, to thank Les and Richard and others who shared very personal stories to really get the impact across.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know that's tough for a lot of folks that feel so strongly about it, and it's been one of the messages that John and I have talked about is, it's a delicate subject, but that's the emotion it's important to tap into, right? Like that's the emotion that we have to convey to help bring awareness, but it's a really vulnerable position to be in, and it's a tough thing to ask somebody to lay that out, just when they feel so strongly about something like that, so.
I think we also should acknowledge the, in the setup we have right now, this moment, that there's a role for all of us in this room to play that is 100% supporting them and the message from them. Because we're in the best place to talk to the people who are like us about this important need and work.
I think even tapping into the, responsibility of them is really powerful, and I think it's useful is to bring that with anybody, you can talk about the connection, but if you don't have direct connection to any indigenous tribe, like in a lot of places where we work, like there's no current presence, so the personal responsibility I thought that was really important, and a lot of speakers mentioned that.
Yeah, that was actually one of the things that, when we brought that group together, for the project that Tony was talking about with bringing the different values of why we should consider something like that, the ethical responsibility was one of them, and it was really geared. That's why we put it in like the Journal of Forestry, because we want to approach the forestry community that maybe isn't normally doing more of like arboriculture kind of techniques, and to recognize that, with all these new invasives that are coming in, like, we have to broaden the way people are looking at this and hopefully change that perspective a little bit.
Yeah, I think just kind of like adding on to that is just like in Maine, we rely so thoroughly on like the regenerating forest that the idea of planting trees is kind of strange to us. And so like that just is a shift that has to happen.
Yeah, I don't know what,
like-
my neighborhood plants trees except me.
Yeah.
So like, and they all look at me weird, but you know, I'm the only one that's gonna have green trees around my house when the beach leaves these wet all beach. That table back there is super patient and they only raise their hands.
I'm from central Massachusetts and we don't have a lot of brown ash. We have green and white ash, which is being devastated by the emerald ash borer. So I went from yesterday morning being horrified to hear that they were on the better end of things from what we're seeing. To feeling really empowered, seeing what you all are doing to fight the emerald ash borer. And we also work really closely with the Nipmuc tribe and some tribes in southern New England. And the green and white ash are very culturally significant for them. They use the bark to cover their traditional homes that they build. And so while, you know, they're not doing the basket making that's happening up here in Wabanaki, like it's still very important. And so I don't want that to get lost, but I'm really excited to like, because we're already in relationship with them and just seeing how we can do what you guys have been doing up here so well and start to apply that down in southern New England and fight for all the ash down there also. So thank you guys all for your work. So.
And I just wanted to add, I don't know if we have this in Maine, but I know they do in Vermont, because this program got founded in Vermont and we adopted it in Massachusetts, is foresters for the birds. So in particular, like what sorts of species of birds are associated with certain types of forest stands? And that information hopefully is out there, because that's important information actually.
Were mentioned yesterday. I think the grosbeak was one of them.
I heard that.
And then there was one other, but I forget which one.
What was it?
Crossbills.
Oh, crossbills. Thank you.
Come down the white square.
I wanted to say something too. Somebody said something that reminded me of it.
Can you
But
speak
it-
loud? Thanks.
Oh. Yeah, I can't tell how loud I'm talking, but the last session, I can't remember who it was. Somebody mentioned how the. I,
You could have come up
see, in
here.
my head, can you hear me? It sounds like I'm like yelling really loud, so I can't tell. So in the last session, somebody brought up how the basket makers weren't even coming to these meetings anymore because it was too hard and it was too sad. And she specifically said something about what I said about the second wave in Ohio. And I felt really bad about that, and I started thinking about it, and I was like, and tying together the silviculture studies that were being presented, and I had talked to Les and I said, well, how many years does it take once you clear or make an opening for the ash regeneration for that to reach basket size? And he said 3 to 5 years. And I was like, well, once EAB peaks and it goes down, at least in Ohio, it took between 10 and 15 years for us to start to see damage again. So there is hope for another generation of basket trees with that.
Yeah, I mean, we're working on that, you know, it's one of the things that we're evaluating and first of all, we want to just get stuff established. And then the next kind of phase of that is seeing if we can get them into basket quality or size specimens. So it's a little bit to be determined yet, but we do know, like, once you open it up, like the ability to put on growth rapidly, they do respond really quickly. And I saw that from some of Rivers data that he showed earlier. We've seen that in other spots where we've opened things up. I didn't present any of the data because we only have one site that working with the St. Regis Mohawk that's been cleared for a couple of years now. And I was coring trees there and I was coring recruits and looking at the tree rings and it looks the exact same response as what River's finding in the aftermath forest back in Michigan, where the canopy, once the canopy's gone, those trees are responding if they're present. So we're seeing the same thing, at least initially, in some of our silvicultural cuts, which we'd expect. So now it's more of a question of
How fast the
how can we
EAB
keep them protected long enough to grow basket quality trees. So it's positive. there's still some questions remaining about how
Well, what
how
is
best to
that?
do that.
There was a paper, a poster in the other session that measured what makes a good basket quality tree, and two of the criteria were narrow rings and dense wood. And I don't know how to make dense wood, but if you have a tree released and it's growing fast, it seems opposite of what they want for a basket tree, even if it ends up being nice and big and straight.
Yeah, that's true. Usually you want something around the width of a nickel,
What
but
about a 1 millimeter annual ring?
yeah, I think it's like 2.5 is kind of optimal, but some of the discussions I've had with basket makers is they would rather start with a wide ring than too narrow of a ring, and and the other thing is right now we just want to get things to the right size, and as trees get bigger, you tend to put on less regular growth over the chronology, so I think there's still opportunities for doing the research, especially when it comes to like common garden type experiments about like what kind of spacing and things like that can influence tree width, and that stuff, but right now we're just looking at mostly common gardens from more of a genetics standpoint. But I think there's lots of opportunity, and there's definitely a lot of factors that are gonna affect growth and what actually makes a good tree. So, yeah.
You mentioned, spacing too is another thing.
Ron's, I was gonna put you on the spot anyways to represent the facts.
My poster.
But yeah, this important detail, those are black ash that are in the northern distributional area of the not the northern, but kind of north. And I'm working right now on trying to find what condition enhance the quality of the tree. But I also think that people, I've talked about it earlier, but that people in Maine are maybe looking for thicker rings. But the competition index, I think it's really something that influence with quality for basketry, but those are things that are going on.
Yeah, and the other thing is we've summarized a lot of the other characteristics in different formats, some of the stuff that Teresa Scord was mentioning earlier, that have been video documentation and deposits in different places, we had a black ash symposium here and in Maine, it was actually here at the university, it was probably 2014 or something like that. It was a while ago, and one of the things that came out of that was we ended up publishing a paper in the Journal of Forestry that kind of laid out a lot of different characteristics, from site characteristics where people find things that work well and other things that don't work well, and maybe some tree architecture and tree rings, and try to just kind of compile what, because there's a wide range. Each basket maker in region kind of has their preferences based on what they're used to. So kind of summarizing that is a little bit of a challenge. You got more?
I just wanted to see that at some point it's just nice to try some stuff that you will see how trees react to this kind of opening, and yeah, there are so many things we don't know about black ash that at some point we just have to try, I think, and see how we.
I agree completely. In fact, that's a conversation we've had for a long time. I know this was shortly after EAB was founded in 2002, and I was working in the Lake States, so mid to late 2000s. And people in Minnesota, where emerald ash borer wasn't yet, were worried about all their, you saw from the presentations yesterday, how much black ash is in Minnesota. A lot of the state people were coming to me and asking, what should we do? Like, we want to do something. And there were other people saying like, oh, slow down, we don't have any of the research done about what to do, what that's optimal and that kind of thing. But, my message to them was, I think we should go out and start trying stuff, even before we have research, because there's there's so little time to get out and implement things that you can't always wait for the optimal research to be done. You have to do stuff while, you know, you got trees on the ground, so. But that message has certainly changed over time. I think now fewer people are of the mind, like, let's wait and just see and come up with a plan. Now they're more willing to do things because of the gravity of the situation, so.
Maybe I'll just add something, if it's okay. I don't know if does someone else have a question?
Go for it.
Oh yeah, and I would like to add to it that especially when you are working between with indigenous knowledge carriers and university and research organizations, sometimes we are used as researcher to wait for results, for example, or to not. How can I say that? I've learned to kind of embrace the uncertainties and all of this, like, not spiritual, not always spiritual, but cultural aspect that I don't always understand, but you have to accept it, and it's out of your like comfort zone. When you work with indigenous people, I think you learn to be comfortable with it, but it is still hard sometimes for foresters or more traditional.
All right, looks like people are starting to filter in, so it must be 2 o'clock. You guys did great. Thanks for me talking to you for the whole hour and not starting to sleep. So I'll do my best to kind of condense this for the group. Unless somebody, Jennifer, do you want to condense this for? Well, I'll be sure to pick in plenty, so.
Today, he wasn't there, like, he wasn't in the room. Like, everyone's trying to, like, one up.